I'm going to be presenting my little short 5-minute discussion around procurement, best practice procurement. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if that works. Chris, can you just confirm that you can see that?
I certainly can, and
Okay.
I think for all of us, we'll comment if we can't see it. So
okay, that's fine.
Okay.
So I'll continue. Well, thank you everybody for this time. I've only got 5 minutes, so without wasting too much of it, I will carry on and head straight into it. Well, first a welcome from Joburg. There's no wind outside today, so we still call the Windy City, even though we've been renamed. I'll just go through a couple of things around best practice procurement for engineering services. Let's see. Get this to, let me just check. I didn't want to go to the next slide, so I'll just try and do that again. Okay. Just a little bit of background around why we're always talking about procurement. Currently in the public sector, procurement of engineering services is highly problematic, inefficient and ineffective, and fails to meet the needs of the country through unacceptable delays. Some of us have experienced it, non-delivery. Currently, officials not being present and available at all times due to COVID-19, many working from home. And then, of course, you have our old issue around corruption. Legislation around procurement, a couple of them would be your triple PFA, MFMA, BFMA, and your triple BE Act. While these are considered to be effective and well drafted, we are still being frustrated by officials who don't seem to understand how these acts and different guidelines are to be used. And for fear of making mistakes, officials are sometimes left frozen and frozen into inaction, thus leading to the severe delays in the procurement process. For procurement of engineering services, we have the open tendering system, which is competitive to maximize economy and efficiency and to get rid of favoritism and subjectivity. We also have a form of tendering, which is selective tendering, which is almost like open tendering, but with a little bit of restriction. And that restriction is around you need to have the necessary qualification, experience, and financial capacity to undertake the specified project. We also have another form of engineering procurement, which is sole sourcing, which is not often used around here with us. Because it's not easily justified that only one person is able to do the work. In conditions of such that it's difficult to prove that a competitive bid wouldn't be the better process to follow. And then for the smaller contracts, which is the small contracts, is when things are very small and a lengthy tendering process would not be feasible or viable. For an overview of the engineering services, for a tender to go out, you need procurement planning and budgeting. You need to get the notices out, specification needs to be done. Evaluation criteria needs to be agreed upon by the client through their supply chain processes. Criteria for qualifying for tenders also needs to be set up. And then, of course, the tendering stage where we can just spend a little bit of time around is quality-based or quality and cost-based selection. And then, of course, once the tenders are in at the receipt stage and the opening of tenders, then the evaluation of those tenders happens, and then we award the contract to the successful bidder. Just a quick one around quality-based selection. The main elements involved are the advertisement for request for the technical proposal. The respondent submits a technical proposal indicating qualifications. Selection committee, evaluation process, with or without interviews, and evaluation criteria, proposals, and then you negotiate the fees. This would typically be what we know as a panel appointment but with inclusion of experience, capability, but without price. Sometimes rates are requested at this stage for the panel appointment, but not always the case. What we find most of the time is quality and cost-based selection, where procurement procedure respondents submitted both a technical and a financial proposal. The technical merit of the proposal constitutes the primary selection criterion, and the financial terms are of secondary importance. Our system then also incorporates a triple BEE point system, and then the overall points are then allocated based on either 80-20 or 90-10. As we know, it's based on the size of the project. We do currently, unfortunately, experience a number of issues with the current system as it stands. We find that the professional services are being commoditized as a one-size-fits-all type of solution and off-the-shelf type commodity. More emphasis is placed on price and less on quality and functionality, which is inappropriate for a sector as it reduces the quality and functionality to minimum levels. It encourages the industry to debilitating discounting. We're going in at prices which is not sustainable. And then we also find that public sector clients and service providers suffer when the infrastructure project exceed 3 years due to onerous regulatory requirements. So your big projects are now, for example, would be a big wastewater treatment works, some big plant, because it's the size of, just the nature of the beast, would go over the 3-year time frame. It becomes problematic for the officials. And that then leads to unbundling of projects, whereas in the old days, it would have been one project. Institutional problems also currently being experienced would be the lack of capacity within your institutions. Many of the managers within the procurement process aren't really experienced in what they're doing, and then that leads to very poor bid documents out in the tendering sphere. Procurement irregularities due to the poor documents also seem to be on the increase, which is compounded by lack of enforcement and accountability. Institutional supply chains have a poor understanding of professional services and regard all companies as being equal regardless of experience and staff and past experience. So sometimes price is all they look at once functionality is reached. Locally, we've been listening to many complaints from some of our member firms, and and it affects the procurement process directly. COVID-19 is being used as an excuse for almost everything nowadays. A delay in emails, delay in all sorts of aspects within the tendering process. Panel tenders seem to be the way to go for many municipalities for 3 years, 36 months periods. But even on these panels, no project seems to come out of it. So it's almost like you're putting your tender in a black box and nothing's coming from it. And it's problematic because it ties up your resources for that period. Panel tenders not being pruned down, meaning that your best bidders on a panel tender, they don't seem to be selected. And what then happens is that your proposed panel is all the responsive tenders, which can be up to 30, which sort of negates the real issue for panel tenders to sort of just get an RFQ out at a later stage, and you only have 6 or 10 consultants for a specific RFQ. We're also finding that tender documents are becoming costly, some to as much as R1,000, and for nothing, because you get sent a link where you have to print it out yourself. Attendance at some of compulsory clarification meetings in areas different to tender collection locations, also something which has now popped up. Obviously, with some people dealing with SANDRAL-specific tenders, you don't so often get the feedback as to why you didn't get to the financial stage, and then you don't know how to address your your non-compliance for the next time you wanted to put in a bid. Mentioned before, poorly spec documents and poor functionality criteria, which leads to subjectivity on evaluation stage. Availability of officials responsible for bids to clarify matters. General communication problems for addendums, intention to award, your 14-day objection period after you've heard that somebody is being awarded the tender. Non-responsive to requests for information to decide whether to object or intention to award. Your Public Access to Information Act applications, which you submit to your agency, department, or municipality, just being ignored. And then, of course, your next step, having to go the legal route, which becomes costly. And that's just for information that should be freely available. So you're having to then decide, having to go through the costly route to decide whether to challenge an appointment. How do we improve things? As in conclusion, we suspect that public agencies, public sector agencies, municipalities and departments, due to the lack of technical skills, they should encourage or be mandated to appoint consulting engineering firms for this purpose to compile comprehensive RFPs to try to assist in the process. Infrastructure tenders should be awarded according to the scope of the project and not limited to 3 years. Clarification of consultants to distinguish between professional and non-professional consultants. Liaison with National Treasury to be stepped up to highlight the plight of engineers to address the challenges that we currently face. And supply chains to employ or utilize professional engineers to assist with supply chain practices. And then, of course, obviously, trying to stay positive through all of this. I've come to the end of my little period. Thank you very much for listening and stay safe.